name is Adam Dean. I'm also with Great Cal Security. I'm not going to tell you to not go into incident response because I'd love to have you. Full disclosure, I'm pretty bad with PowerPoint, so throughout this presentation you're going to see random transitions that I felt were appropriate. So like I said, I'm with Adam Dean with Great Cal Security. We primarily work with small to medium-sized businesses. And I'm fairly new to the IR game. I've been doing it for 2 to 3 years now. So the corporate sector is quite the interesting place when it comes to incident response. Most people don't really know what they're doing. If you get called for an incident, 9 times out of 10, they don't even know what really incident response is. And I indented it, see? I'm getting better at PowerPoint. Those are all actually the same client, which will be the first incident. I don't know if anybody was here for the last, I did this last year. The first one's going to be the same because I have new information that just came in recently that was super fun to deal with. But generally, like I said, the corporate sector of incident response, it's rare to see someone who's good at security or has standardized policies and procedures. And the biggest thing I'm seeing now is like insurance agencies, law firms trying to get into the technical side of incident response. Even though I don't know very many, very technical lawyers that would. So yeah. I'll save my opinions. So basically, this presentation I'm going to go over 3 incidents that happened within the last year. Besides this first one, which because again I got new information. That kind of went sideways, that scope was changed in the middle of it, or stuff that I just found interesting or funny. Really, maybe a better title next year. So the first incident, it's a very small healthcare clinic, about 20 employees, around, I want to say 3,000 patients total, so pretty small. They are not tech-savvy people whatsoever, and they don't really know the technical side of the HIPAA regulations. So they called us saying that 7 records have been, accessible from the internet. Some patient called them saying, "Yeah, I was able to Google my name," and so what we found was, there was an FTP server that allowed these scanning, was just accessible from the internet. 7 records. So that's kind of key part here. It's also important to note, I'm sure a lot of you are somewhat familiar with HIPAA. When it comes to breaches, 500 is the magical number. If you're below 500, it's not considered a HIPAA breach, or it's a different level. But if you're above 500, then it's a bigger deal. So the very next day, the owner of the company got an email from a guy named Johnny, who said that he downloaded the entire FTP site. And he claimed, he wanted $50,000 for the risk of handling HIPAA-related information. He also kept saying Romanian hacker form, which was, okay. And he emailed the owner from, it's a legitimate company apparently, from the organization's email address. At that point, the FBI got involved and they were pretty interested. At least I think. I don't know. I don't ever really know. So what we found through looking at logs is that he actually downloaded around 1,500 records, not 7. And I was able to tell it was him because I just simply pinged the domain on the email address and went searching in logs, like a 1 out of a million chance. It just happened to work. Because of his email, the lawyer that we were working with thought it might be considered extortion. I don't think anything ever came of that because the FBI took over from there. But he also claimed he knew the patient that initially reported that she found her record online and the IT vendor who misconfigured this FTP server to allow anonymous access from the internet. Conspiracy time. So I have a little bit, yeah. So I actually, what I did is I just to show the client, I took access to the server and just graphed it out. And then Johnny is kind of off the screen, but he's up there. And this is from 2013, so this FTP server was open for quite some time. So that could have been past patient records who were on this FTP server that are now just gone. And you're not going to really know which one it is. So by looking at the logs, we obviously saw, like I said, it was from 2013 to 2016 that it was accessible from the internet. The documents were just named Doc1, Doc2, and their images. They can't Google images, or text within images, I guess. So it's certainly really interesting. So in terms of the scope now, that 7 record turned into 1,500, and it's above the magical 500 number, so it's a much bigger deal. I'm not 100% positive on this, but I think within states it could be you have to report the breach within 90 days. It might be 60, might be 30, depending on the state. HIPAA, it is 15, and at this point we were at like day 13. So yeah, it was definitely had to pull a couple all-nighters. And then the contacts there, they were like just going crazy. They didn't know what to do. Again, because they didn't even know really what happened, just because they don't really understand it. And then they were really focusing on putting blame on the IT vendor and taking him to court or whatever, than actually just fixing the issue. They certainly didn't want to place a substitute notification on their website for addresses that couldn't be found when you had to actually notify the affected individuals. They just didn't want to be compliant at all. And then I don't know the actual cost, but I'm estimating, I did some math yesterday, it's somewhere around $40,000. So then the new information comes in. So they took the IT vendor to court, and they just shut down their practice because of this.
Adam, can you explain briefly what type of IT vendor it was? Was it hardware, or they were just simply supporting a server?
It was kind of one of those IT vendors, like, I'm an IT vendor, and just, it was just one guy.
So they were just supporting this?
Yeah, I shouldn't even say vendor, it was a guy. Yeah. Yeah. The whole court thing, it kind of went on for a while. The IT guy, he apparently was, he was trying to, what's the term here, represent himself during the whole court process. And he knew that the client, he knew them pretty well, so he knew that, they didn't want to spend a lot of money. So he just dragged on the whole thing, and eventually, I guess, the client won. But then they were just kind of done, and they just shut their doors. Because, again, they're freaking out during this whole process. So the remaining question is this, which I'd love to know, but I am not the FBI, unfortunately, is how the patient Googled her name. I looked at the documents. There's no way that you just simply Google her name. Unless someone parsed out through the documents and put it somewhere else, and that I didn't see. And then I'm thinking the IT vendor, the patient, and Johnny all knew each other in my little conspiracy. All worked together. That's kind of the conclusion of that one. Definitely, probably top 3 weirdest incidents. Just because everybody was just freaking out the entire time, and it was 1,500 people, still kind of a small scale breach. It's not really that big. I guess it might be big for a smaller practice, but still they're kind of freaking out for whatever reasons. Yeah. So going on to incident number 2, I got back from Puerto Rico, wanted to try out some new Spanish that I learned. So about this client, I put a lot more transitions than I thought I did. Holy shit. So about the client, it doesn't really matter, and it's a medium-sized manufacturing, but it doesn't really matter too much in terms of this incident. So there was an employee who quit, and he just deleted all of his data on his computers and iPhones before he left. Some of this data was critical data that they needed. A couple patent pending documents, something that they were looking for. So they needed some data recovery. And we typically ask them for date ranges and try to something to limit the scope of the data that they want recovered. but it's somewhat, you know, as you can see, they kind of asked for a lot. so it was somewhat, you know, the the employee rarely used his computers, so it was actually easier to recover, even though it was on a solid state drive, which makes it a lot harder to recover data. I always like comparing it to an Etch-a-Sketch. And again, he rarely used his computer, so it was kind of easy to get the data back. He just deleted the data and didn't do any secure erase or wipe the whole drive or anything like that, so it was fairly easy. So we did find the critical data. We also found about 50,000 selfies, and by selfies, I don't mean the stuff you find on Facebook. So that kind of changed the whole game of this. They were no longer concerned about the critical data. They were more concerned about making this guy look bad in a courtroom setting. So it was no longer about, you know, recovering the actual data, even though they got it still. More about, you know, making the guy look bad. So the employee leaves, and the client settles the case, and they finally implemented an acceptable use policy, which was great. So final one, incident number 3, the virus. So this was a fairly large public school district. I would put more pictures like Reg, but I've had no internet access. I wish I had more pictures, so you get transitions, okay? You're gonna have to deal with it. So fairly large public school district. From them calling us, we could tell that they're just bad at managing what they have and keeping it up to date. So, and by managing what they have, actually, like, you know, making it work out as well. They just have kind of servers laying over here that they don't even remember are there. So the initial call. So the client discovered these tasks on their Microsoft Windows server. I don't know what year. That they were just kind of incremented tasks, and it went to this update.dll, which they figured was malicious. And this is 2016. That's going to be really important. So the whole purpose, what we're there to do is find out what happened, why it happened, how it happened, how to stop it from happening. So just, you know, we took the VMDK, it was a VMware server, and then we kind of went on the hunt for this DLL and to find out, you know, when this actually occurred. We found Symantec logs on the system, which, again, is going to be important. So the screw up, before even knowing what happened, they put on their website that virus was found on a server hosting a bunch of confidential information. Again, probably shouldn't do that. I mean, I can understand, you know, the substitute notice, but they didn't even know what was happening. So nothing was found. DLL doesn't exist anymore. And the tasks appear to be older. So when the DLL doesn't exist, and it's a not ransomware, that typically means, well, it can mean a lot of things. But so basically, I was trying to find out when this happened other ways other than the DLL. So what we found was this was actually an infection back from 2011 that Symantec removed. And logged from the SQL server that went back that far. They had like some application that kind of had custom logs and it showed, you know, what access SQL server. Didn't show anything odd. The logging was somewhat vague. So, but again, 2011, you're not going to see any like information on the system itself to actually point you in that direction. Why are you doing this?
My mom.
So basically, they notified the public because of something that happened or that didn't happen 5 years ago. Yeah, so they, you know, news is all over it, and then they're like, "Oops, nope, never mind." And that is generally it. So, but the corporate side of incident response, the corporate side of incident response, it's not. I might be stereotyping a little bit here, but the government sector seems to be much more process oriented and standardized. At least probably a lot of departments within the government. Okay. Where we deal with, some pretty small businesses that, what's a computer? So it definitely gets a little odd. Even the medium-sized or larger businesses, some of them are just a complete mess. They don't have like a solid security program. Some hospitals, what's a risk assessment? Never done one of those before. So it's definitely, it varies quite a bit. It is quite rare to find a program that when you get there, they already have this stuff for you. One client in particular had a timeline of events that was listed out, so that stuff's super awesome to have. But yes, it varies quite a bit. Yes, Tyler.
You said that case was settled. Can you tell us what that means? What was the settlement?
So I don't know too much information because that's more on the legal side. But I believe the employee brought them to court because he felt like he was being pushed out because he's a minority or something like that. I'm not quite sure.
He was suing them, and so they
yeah. So to make him look, worse, I guess. I don't quite know the details on the legal side of it. Yes.
How much jail time did Johnny get? Did I miss something on the slide?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to talk to the FBI.
Oh.
Yeah.
More to the point, on your slide you asked, did the FBI neutralize the target? But which target? Because it sounds like there could be as many as 3 there.
I don't know. Yes. Yeah. I kind of wish, I was in that side of it where I could just steal people's computers and look around and see what they were doing, but nope.
Any other questions?
Now, does that get a bit frustrating after a while? You really don't know what the resolution is? Found the root cause, but
Yes. So the resolution for us is making sure they can get back to an operating state in terms of those kind of incidents where it's just a breach of confidential information. I wasn't too concerned about Johnny and gang because the FBI has it covered. There would be not much I can do, but in terms of is it frustrating? I would love to know, but I don't lose sleep over it, I guess. Yeah.
How often do you think you're brought in way too late in the process, and you think they've gone very denial until it brings?
9% of times. Yeah. In all reality, if I'm brought in at all, it's too late.
Have you ever had a false positive and not be mentioned?
Yeah.
The third case, right?
Yeah, that one was a big old false positive. They basically called us in the second they saw the tasks. They didn't really do any investigation, which is good, because if they did and they screwed up a bunch of stuff and made it much harder for me, then it makes it harder for me. But yeah, that was probably the biggest false positive because they just put it everywhere. Yeah.
Are you dealing with a lot of ransomware, or if so, are you having any success?
Yeah, so ransomware is my full-time job, and other incidents is like my part-time job almost. But ransomware is super, it can get pretty interesting, but it's pretty boring at the same time, especially if it's, you're just trying to find out how it happens so they can stop it from happening. So it's typically a computer, maybe some file shares. But we've certainly seen some massive attacks where a domain admin downloaded an attachment and did stuff with it.
So are you having any success getting anything back?
We typically, no. So most of the ransomware cases we see is locky or variants like that where you're not going to find a decryption method. But we also have never had a client who paid the ransom, which is, I guess, good. So we kind of
People back up, right?
yeah. Luckily, everyone who we've dealt with had backups.
So it's, it's one thing if you're looking at losing months or years of data. It's another thing if you're looking at losing a day or two.
Right.
Yeah. So not to pay the criminals for a day or two of data is probably, but months or years, you can understand why people would pay.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a moment where you had to talk down a client from paying the ransom, like they were ready to do it, just you got there and you were like, no.
Yeah. I mean, yes, have definitely tried to talk people down to paying the ransom because they're just overwhelmed, especially if it's a massive ransomware attack where it affects everything. Talking them down is kind of a big part, only because
You're playing the 50-50 game. And will they
you're
give
playing
you-
the 50-50 game, and they know that you're willing to pay. So what's to say you won't pay again? So I'd never ever recommend it. Hi, Tyler.
Was that a legit case where you saw someone with domain admin privileges? Who was the
Yeah.
point of contact?
3 or 4 times.
Sweet.
They weren't small either. Small organizations. Yeah.
Have you
You got
ever
time for one
seen
more question?
someone who has put ransomware on a computer and then, received a payment and then actually followed through and decrypted the data as a way for like making a name for themselves so that more people would pay that ransom?
So you do probably 70% of the time it will be decrypted, somewhere around there. Because you got to realize if they're known to not decrypt data after you pay, then nobody's going to pay them.
Exactly.
All
Some
right.
of them even provide tech support.
What's that?
Some of them even provide tech support.
Yeah.
On dedicated websites where they'll open a chat session and talk you through applying the decryption.
Well,